Hey there, it's your old pal Benji. Welcome back to the Ask Judgeman series on the Legacy Crusaders YouTube channel. Now, normally we either talk about a specific game aspect, or recently I tried talking about some new released cards, but today I'm actually going to be talking about an older card. The card we're talking about is Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Quite possibly the most commonly found card in every deck in the game. It is currently one of the most played hand traps, and probably the least likely hand trap to wind up on the Forbidden and Limited list, making this video as timeless as possible. Today I wanted to talk about some of the common questions that come up in reference to this card, some things you may not have considered. Often I'm asked at my locals, can I ogre this? Can I not ogre this? And it's an incredibly annoying question because I'm pretty sure most of these details should be very obvious, but I'm sure you may also find something interesting here that you were not aware of. So let's take a look at Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit is a light type psychic monster, level 3, with 0 attack and 1800 defense. It is also a tuner. Its effect reads, during either player's turn, when a monster on the field activates its effect, or when a spell or trap card that is already face up on the field activates its effect, you can send this card from your hand or your side of the field to the graveyard, destroy that card on the field. You only use this effect of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit once per turn. Alright, so that's the first. Now we're going to talk about some of the commonly asked questions. The first question is, when I activate the card Trickstar Lightstage, or Union Hanger, or Magical Meltdown, can I ogre those cards? Now, an important aspect of those cards, and why people actually want to ogre them, is that they are field spells. And because they are field spells, they are technically continuous spells. And continuous spells and traps need to remain face up on the field in order to resolve their effects successfully. If they would be destroyed by being chained to with an MST of some sort, those cards would resolve without effect, meaning they weren't negated, but they are not on the field to resolve, so they would prevent them from being searched. So if you could destroy these with Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, it essentially gives you an MST you can activate during your opponent's turn from your hand. So a lot of people would like access to a card that would allow you to do this. There is a similar card that does allow you to do this, and that card is TYPHOON, although it does have a restriction, being that your opponent needs to have 2 spell or trap cards on the field in order to activate TYPHOON. Anyways, can you Ghost Ogre, Trickstar Lightstage, Union Hanger, or Magical Meltdown? The answer is no, you cannot. And the reason for that is part of Ghost Ogre's effect reads, when a spell or trap card that is already face up on the field activates its effect. And because the definition of activating a spell or trap card is to place it face up on the field, and those cards search their targeted search cards when they are activated, they are not already face up on the field when they are triggered. And Ghost Ogre is a quick effect. It does respond directly to a card's chain link. So if you activate Trickstar Lightstage, it will be Chainlink 1, and then you have to respond with Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit as Chainlink 2. But because that card is being activated at that time and was not already face up on the field, its activation timing is not correct. A lot of these cards actually do have a secondary effect, such as Trickstar Lightstage. It has an effect that says you can target one set card in your opponent's spell and trap card zone, and while this card's face up on the field, that set card cannot be activated until the end phase. Also destroy it during the end phase. Now that effect is a trigger effect that can be activated during your main phase. That is an effect that is activated while this card is already face up on the field. So if your opponent was to target a set card in your spell and trap card zone, you could chain Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit to destroy that card. And in which case the effect to destroy the set card or to prevent it from being activated would not resolve. So it would resolve without effect. Similarly, Union Hanger is an effect that if you were to summon a light Union monster, let me read these specifics. Once per turn, if a light machine type Union monster is normal or special summoned to your field, you can target one of those monsters and equip from your deck to that monster one appropriate light machine type Union monster with a different name from that monster. That effect does trigger when Union Hanger is already on the field. It is a speed spell 1 effect. It activates when the monster is summoned, but Union Hanger would already be face up on the field, so you could respond with Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, destroying Union Hanger, and as it is a continuous spell technically, as a field spell, it needs to remain face up on the field to resolve that effect. It will not equip the monster to the summoned Union monster. Next is Dragonic Diagram, which is another field spell. If your opponent were to play the Dragonic Diagram, it doesn't actually do anything at the time that it is played. It does give a continuous effect of protection to true Draco monsters that were tribute summoned, or true kings that were tribute summoned. Not that anyone tribute summons a true king monster, but they would have a continuous degree of protection. Also, their attack and defense modifier would also be continuous, and those effects don't actually trigger, so when you activate Dragonic Diagram, there is no effect that's occurring at that point. but it does have a trigger effect to destroy one card on your field or in your hand in order to search a True Draco or True King card from your deck. So that effect can be Ghost Ogre because it is triggering while this card is already face up, and if you do that, Dragonic Diagram will resolve with that effect without destroying a card because destroying a card is not a cost to resolve Dragonic Diagram. Another card that is often asked if you can Ghost Ogre is Brilliant Fusion. Now, technically, there is an effect on Brilliant Fusion that you can Ghost Ogre, but when it is played, the Fusion Summon is performed at that time. Brilliant Fusion is being played at that time, so it's not activating while it's already face up on the field. It is activated and resolving at that time. So the Fusion Summon cannot be Ghost Ogre, but the secondary effect of Brilliant Fusion that says once per turn, you can discard one spell card, and that monster special summon by this card's effect gains attack and defense equal to its original attack and defense until the end of your opponent's turn. Is a effect that can be Ghost Ogre because it is a trigger effect that you would trigger during your main phase after this card is already face up on the field. Next up are a couple of cards that have effects that can be activated when they're flipped face up, in addition to later on in the turn. So one of my favorites, Psyframe Overload. It reads, once per turn, you can banish one Psyframe monster from your hand or face up on your side of the field, then target one card on the field and banish it face down. Now that effect can be activated when you flip this card face up. So if you flip this card face up and choose to use its effect, you can banish one Psyframe card as cost and target one card on the field and banish it face down. And at that time, your opponent cannot Ghost Ogre this card because it is being activated and it was not already face up on the field. It's being turned face up on the field when resolving. Now, some people will flip over their continuous cards, such as this one, just to have it face up, because there are cards in the game that cannot deal with cards that are already face up, such as Totally Awesome. It can only negate the activation of a spell or trap card, meaning the placing face up of that card in the field. So sometimes you'll flip this card face up in advance so that it can't be negated by a card like Totally Awesome. Although, by being already face up, if you were to trigger the effect of Psyframe Overload later on in that turn by banishing a Psyframe as cost, it would then be triggering while it is already face up and thus be a targetable card for Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Please excuse my use of the word targeting. I don't mean it's targeting because Ghost Ogre does not say it targets. I mean it becomes a valid card to respond to because it's already face up on the field. Alright, let's take a look at one more continuous trap that can negate but doesn't always, that can be destroyed by Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit but isn't always destroyed by Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. The last one we're going to be talking about here is Lose One Turn. Activate this card only if you currently control no special summon monsters. During the turn a monster is special summoned, negate its effect. If an effect monster is special summoned in attack position, change it to defense position. So the effect that negates a monster that's special summoned is a continuous effect, so if a monster is summoned to the field, its effect is negated. That does not trigger. So when you flip Lose One Turn, it doesn't actually do anything. It'll just negate the effects of cards on the field. Although, if a monster is summoned, and its effect to switch that monster's defense position is a trigger effect. So that will start a chain, and that can be responded to, unless, of course, there are two trigger effects that go on chain, and you can choose the order. So there are some ways to avoid cards getting Ghost Ogred when they're trigger effects, just by having multiple triggers. Let's talk about monsters. Now, this is where Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit seems to not be consistent with what you'd expect it to do. For instance, Trickstar CANDINA. When this card is normal summoned, you can add one Trickstar card from your deck to your hand. Each time your opponent activates a spell or trap card, inflict 200 damage to your opponent immediately after it resolves. So this card has an on-summon effect, which means its summon is successful, meaning this card is already face up on the field when it activates. This is unlike any spell or trap card, which, when you play it, is not already face up. It's being placed face up at that time, and the activation of the card starts a chain, unlike the summon of a monster, which does not. So a monster that activates on summon activates after it's successfully on the field already. Although the wording of Ghost Ogre doesn't really matter for that. It says when a monster on the field activates its effect. So if it's already face up, it is activating its effect. Let's move on to a couple of other things about Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit that are worth knowing, and that are cards that it cannot negate. The first of which a lot of people were hoping they could negate is Imperial Order, which is a continuous trap card that negates the effects of spell cards. So it does have a maintenance cost that's paid during the standby phase of both players' turn, which is you pay 700 life points and destroy this card if you cannot pay the life points. So players always hope that you can Ghost Ogre this card to get it off the field without using a spell card, because most spell and trap destruction in most players' decks are spells, so you can't really Twin Twister or Mystical Space Typhoon Imperial Order unless you activate them in response to Imperial Order, so it hasn't resolved yet. So players always hope that they can Ghost Ogre this card. So during the standby phase, when the life point payment comes around, the maintenance cost, players try to chain Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Now, a maintenance cost is not activating a card effect, so because it's not an activation, it's not a card you can respond to. So Imperial Order is not a card you can destroy with Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Another card which was recently eroded, originally could not be Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbited, but it can be now, is Future Fusion. It's a spell card that used to read, when this card is activated, show your opponent a monster in your extra deck and then send all of its fusion material from your deck to the graveyard. But because of the new wording on this card, Future Fusion says, during the standby phase, after this effect, after this card has been activated, show your opponent a monster in the extra deck and then send all the fusion material to the graveyard. So that effect will trigger in the next standby phase, which is now, because Future Fusion is already face up, Ghost Ogre can respond at that time and destroy Future Fusion. Now, there are a couple of scenarios where you cannot activate Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, and those are when you cannot pay the cost. Now, Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit's cost is to send this card from your field or in your hand to the graveyard. So if you can't actually send cards to the graveyard, or monsters to the graveyard in this case because it is a monster card, you actually cannot activate Ghost Ogre at all. It's actually illegal to even try. So if a card like Dimensional Fissure or Masked Hero Darklaw or Macrocosmos, or even a Herald of the Arclight are on the field, you cannot use Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit from your hand. Although under Herald of the Arclight, if Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit is on the field, you can use it because it only banishes monsters that are sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard. So in any of the other scenarios, whether under Dimensional Fissure or Macrocosmos or Darklaw, monsters currently that you control would go to the banish zone, and since that's not the graveyard, you can't actually activate the effect of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit at that time. But under Herald of the Arclight, if a monster is on the field, you can send it to the graveyard. So that's the only exception to that particular scenario of cards that I've listed here. Let's talk about a couple of other monsters that people have trouble using Ghost Ogre on, which may matter in the future to you. The first of which is Firewall Dragon. Now, Firewall Dragon has two effects. One of his effects is you can return monsters from the field or the graveyard of either player equal to the number of monsters it's co-linked with, and that is an effect. It's a quick effect that can be activated during either player's turn, but because it's a quick effect and it doesn't meet the conditions of the card that activates in the damage step, you can activate it at almost any time, which is also the appropriate time for Ghost Ogre to respond to. So if you were to activate the effect to return a card to the hand with Firewall Dragon, Ghost Ogre can destroy it. Now, Firewall Dragon does have another effect, which says if a card this card points to is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can special summon one monster from your hand. Is an effect Ghost Ogre can also respond to, and that will occur if perhaps the monster that Firewall Dragon pointed to was sent to the graveyard as material for another link summon. Although, it is possible that the monster that Firewall Dragon was pointing to was destroyed by battle in the damage step, in which case you cannot use Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit cannot be used during the damage step, and the reason for that is it does not fit the criteria of a card that can be activated during the damage step. Cards that can be activated in the damage step include counter traps, which it is not, monster effects that negate the activation of a spell, trap, or monster effect, which it does not, or cards that directly modify the attack and defense of a card, which it also does not. So you can't use Ghost Ogre Snow Rabbit during the damage step, even though it may respond to a card outside of the damage step. So Firewall Dragon's effect occurs when the card is sent to the graveyard. So that involves a card moving from one place to another, which is another type of card that can be used during the damage step. The card triggers when another card moves from one place to another. It can trigger in the damage step. Other cards that people constantly ask whether or not they can use Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit on include High Speed Right Chambara, who, when he declares an attack, gains 200 attack, or whenever this card's involved in a battle, it gains 200 attack. That effect occurs during the damage step, and as we just said, Ghost Ogre cannot be used during the damage step. Another card similar, which comes up quite a bit, is Eater of Millions. Its effect to banish a card occurs at the start of the damage step, so it cannot be used during the damage step as well. So you cannot use Ghost Ogre on an Eater of Millions. Another card that you cannot use Ghost Ogre on is Borreload Dragon. Firstly, its effect to take control of an opponent's monster occurs during the damage step, so that's one reason why you can't do it. Secondly, its effect to decrease the attack of an opponent's monster by 500 specifically says you can't respond to that card with a monster effect. Of course, Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit is a monster, therefore you can't use that effect to destroy Borreload Dragon for that reason. Last monster we're going to talk about here is Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, which is commonly played now. It has two effects, one of which is to destroy one monster you control or in your hand, and change all monsters your opponent control to face down defense position. That effect can be activated during the main phase, and because you can respond to that, and it's not in the damage step, you can use Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit to destroy Ultimate Conductor Tyranno. Although its second effect, which is to attack all opponent's monsters, well, as a continuous effect to attack all your opponent's monsters once, does not activate, so that's an effect that you can't respond to. And its last effect, which occurs during the damage step when you battle a defense position monster, you can send it to the graveyard and inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent. Actually, it's the other way around. You inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent and then send it to the graveyard. Occurs in the damage step, and as we already said, Ghost Ogre cannot be used during the damage step. So that's kind of cover everything that I can think of about this particular card. If you have any questions about Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, please leave them down below in the comments. If there's any questions whatsoever, if you want to see some other videos, click on one of the links here, or make sure to click the subscribe button if you have not already to stay tuned for our next video on whatever card it may be. If you have any suggestions, you can also leave those down in the comments below. Thank you guys for coming. We appreciate your viewership.